Hello and welcome to the Plant Paradigm Podcast, where we have inspiring conversations with amazing individuals from all around the world and look for ways to create a clean, green, and sustainable planet, us and all other beings. I'm your host, Tom Simak, an athlete and fellow plant eater who strives to optimize every living ecosystem. Passionate about looking after this beautiful floating rock we call home and all the lovely creatures that dwell among it. Today's conversation is with my good friend and fellow plant eater, Dr. Andrew Little. After the love of our last conversation on episode 101 was released, I knew I had to have him back for round 2. Andrew, as you'll know if you listen to the first episode, is incredibly knowledgeable, compassionate, and loves an evidence-based approach to being plant-based and having a sustainable lifestyle. Our first conversation together is a great episode to listen to if you want to learn about raising kids on a plant-based diet and the hierarchy of science. By way of background, Andrew is a family man and a working anaesthetist, hence his passion in antibiotic resistance. Today's conversation starts around dietary, social and racial injustices, and the rest themes around a Q&A and a host of topics I know you peeps have been asking for. I actually put out a Q&A question on Instagram stories with what people would love us to cover in the conversation. So if you're not following us on Instagram, head over to plant.paradigm and join the community. I know you'll learn plenty from this episode, and if you do, please spare a quick 5 seconds just to tick that 5-star button on Apple or even Spotify. Yeah, Spotify has that now. So if you've listened to Spotify, not Apple, which I always usually tell people on Apple to review anyways, just head over to Spotify, click that 5-star, and it helps us out so much. But with that being said, I will leave you to enjoy this in-depth conversation with Dr. Andrew Little. Dr. Andrew Little, welcome to round 2 of the Plant Paradigm Podcast. How are you going?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolute pleasure. What's been new in your world?
Goodness. What has been new? Just being a father, working. Just got back from Fraser Island, as you know. Had a beautiful holiday. We were talking about this earlier, and a very mindful holiday. And just being present with the kids. And it's really given me a big taste of where we sort of think we want to go and travel and the things we want to do with our kids. So, but life is good. Life is really good.
What you said before you're feeling quite relaxed. What have you been reading?
A couple of books. So, as you probably know, I always stick to those 6 pillars of health. So mindset, Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty. That was a good one.
Beautiful book.
Yeah, have you read it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And then The Resilience Project by Hugh Van... Can't remember his name.
Sorry, Hugh Van.
Hugh Van, someone. He was a school teacher, and he's now developed sort of a psychology program for kids and things at school. So
awesome.
That was really good, and a few good podcasts. So there's a good lecture series called The Science of Mindfulness, I believe. The Science of Mindfulness on the great courses. It's on Audible, and it just goes into a lot of science about the science behind mindset and its relation to your health and things. So yeah, those are the big ones that I've been looking at.
That's amazing. Honestly, to be mindful it's funny when you do look at the pillars of the health, there's so much going on and you have to do so many different things to really be the best version of yourself. It's almost frustrating in a way that there's no if you just eat a good diet, you'll be perfectly healthy. It's almost frustrating that you have all these aspects, and it's also beautiful in a lot of ways that you get to learn all these different ways to look after yourself. Yeah,
I totally agree. I think when I was a physio, I thought that health was all about exercise, and then when I went to med school, I thought, oh, maybe it's about diet as well. I started to learn about that, and then now as I progress through it, I realised it's about so much more, and especially the social connections and investing so much time in my family life and forming those connections with my 2 boys and my wife, and having a really healthy relationship with my wife has been a huge priority. I just actually read a book by Gottman. He's a I don't know his. God, all these names escape me, but it was about the 7 principles of marriage, and I just think there's always something you can learn, and to become a better partner, and it just you just. It's almost like you fill your house with happiness. It's really good. It's a really good place to be. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to just fill your house with happiness. Otherwise, if it's not happiness, what is it? It could be sadness, grief, could be held on.
Fear, anxiety, all these things, depression people go through, and you've really got to work at it every day. I had to work at it. I had I had issues with this anxiety, not crippling, but I had my own issues, and you just got to work at it. The first thing is recognition, identifying it, and then going from there, I reckon. Yeah,
I love that. I'm hoping we don't get too sweaty during this conversation. So for those on video, you can obviously see we're in our new home, in our van set up here, and Andrew's cozily in the corner there, and we're just chilling, just having a good time.
It's epic. It's a beautiful place.
I'm glad we can fit 2 people and Shana in here, which is awesome. On the topic of mindfulness and mental health, there's this recent study that Sean brought up just before we hit the record button, and it's kind of gone a little bit viral with the help of mainstream media. I guess in a way that's really, really bad. And I just did up a post, which I'll probably put up on Instagram right after this episode, and it's about the headline is vegans and vegetarians have a higher risk of depression. That's the headline. And we went and had breakfast at this place in Southport. I'm like, oh, a newspaper. What is this? And we opened it up, and that was the headline.
Yeah, it's insane.
And it really frustrated me because the first thing, and I was telling Sean, I'm like, the first thing in my mind was, I can almost bet that if I open up the actual article, it's not going to say anything relating to this. It's purely headline sensationalism. And I actually read the paper today, and I spent a few hours kind of looking through it, double checking everything, and on the actual paper, it says a well-planned, high-quality, plant-based diet reduces your risk of depression. That's what it says.
Wow.
And so what the point is they looked at, it was a study of 200 people, and it was just online surveys using Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, I believe, was the third one. And yes, I guess there's a lot of merit in these surveys, but they're not going to be the most accurate piece of data we have. And it is the first of its kind. So it definitely brings attention. Is it actually something about the diet, or is it the lifestyle? What is it? And then when you look at it at the actual bottom during the discussion section, they're looking and they're citing different studies, of course, as you do. And they say, but also a low quality Mediterranean diet, a low quality keto diet, and a low quality omnivorous diet also leads to a higher risk of depression. But not one media article mentioned that.
Yeah.
Not one article mentioned that actually a well-planned plant-based diet can reduce your risk. And before I let you comment on it with your thoughts, we're actually in this group on Facebook run by a fellow podcast, previous guest, Jenny Cameron. Yeah. Malcolm Mackay, and Whole Foods Plant-Based Aussies, I believe it's called, on Facebook. Yep. And someone posted it on there, and Dr. Megan Lee, who did the article, actually commented saying this was actually not the result of the study. The media has taken it out of context. Here's the link to the article. And it's so frustrating that an author can publish something and something completely new comes out.
Yeah, it's insane. It's pseudo-journalism, right? And this is the world we're entering now, a world of data asphyxiation, where we're just choked by information and misinformation more importantly. And these industries are very clever, and they want to manufacture ignorance. They want to manufacture doubt. So they come up with these studies to essentially create doubt in people's minds. And as soon as there's doubt, what do people do? They just shut down. They go back to what they know. They go back to what they're comfortable with. They go to their comfort zone, and they feel like they get more control that way. And it's just scare tactics, and it's sensational. It's sensationalism of the headlines, and they do this all the time. They did it with the vegan children study.
Yeah,
do you remember that one?
The one we talked about last time we met. They had stunted growth. It was but it was taken out of context, because if you look at other papers, it actually said they grew more, but they were actually thinner as well.
Yeah, but also in this study, it was children who didn't have adequate exposure to sunlight. I can't remember exactly where they were in Scandinavia or Poland or somewhere like that. But, they had inadequate vitamin D intake, inadequate vitamin B12 intake. Of course, we're going to see problems with that. That's nothing we don't already know. We know you need B12. We know you need vitamin D. And we know that you need to be a bit more concerned about that on a vegan diet. That study didn't tell us anything different. It's like we already know that B12 or vitamin D deficiencies are going to potentially cause stunting or cause neurological deficits or something like that. But it just really ruffles my feathers when I hear that stuff, because we're trying to progress as society. We're trying to take steps forward. And I feel like every time this gets published, we just take steps back. And I never see quality papers getting published showing the benefits of a whole food plant-based diet. It's a chronic disease, is a pandemic. We are struggling. I see it every day. I'm a disease professional. I deal with disease every day. I can tell you right now, we're doing something wrong, and it ain't the people following a whole food plant-based diet. My kids are thriving. They're fine. I am not depressed at all. I'm as happy as I ever have been. And honestly, I had no idea we were going to come onto this study because of that. But genuinely, deep down, I am super happy. I think that, and I thought about this a while ago, I think that sometimes too, vegans will probably get a little bit down sometimes because
I get that.
You open your mind to you know exactly where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
you open your mind to the information and you see what reality is, and it is depressing. You see what we're doing to the planet. You see what we're doing to the animals. It's really sad. And
came to that conclusion, didn't we?
Yeah, we did come to that conclusion because when I first saw the title, like I said, I thought it was sensationalized, and I didn't think that was the actual results. But then at the same time, I thought, you know what? We are vegans living in a non-vegan world.
Yeah.
So, and part of living with that is incredibly hard, and that's why we have categories of vegans being militant and so forth, because it is hard to look at the state of the world and the state of Australia, this beautiful country we live in, and then you've got the Morrison government doing nothing about it.
Yeah.
And this, and political corruption and all this thing, and of course then you have the death of animals, and then you have underneath all that people coming up and being like, but protein though.
Yeah.
So it's this constant feeding of misinformation that feeds into misinformation that becomes then frustration.
Yep.
Because we're so far. Why are we having this protein conversation when there's so much going on over here?
So old. It's so yesterday. That is literally. But one of the best quotes that I have heard was, and I can't remember if it was in a book by Noam Chomsky. My wife said it to me one time. Said the most intelligent people on this planet are often the most frustrated because they can see a difference between the way the world is and the way the world should be. And that is so true. When you can see what the answer is, when you see, no one wants to watch it. No one wants to see the animals in their cages and the slaughter that goes on. But when you do see it, it can be really upsetting, and it's brutal. And we need, as my wife, another good quote, we must not refuse to endure with our eyes what they have to endure with their bodies. And I did that. I was like, righto, you're right. If I'm going to eat this animal, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to watch where it comes from. People need to educate themselves. And I think I'm as happy as I've ever have been. And I think it's all about maximizing those 6 pillars of health like we've spoken about before.
Yeah. I mean, I think it definitely brings to merit the whole idea of everyone. I mean, we do have a high risk of depression towards all people. And I think it's purely the headline was just not great. I think that's where it really had the opportunity. Where I would maybe change the headline is, low quality diets feed depression.
Yeah.
That's where the headline should have been, because it's true. Obviously, if you're eating high sodium, high fat, that's going to affect you emotionally. And if we touch on spiritual, it's going to affect you in so many different ways. So I think it's just a shame. And I think where the title is, and I don't want to diss the authors too much because, they're just doing what they think maybe was a good job. This hadn't been done on vegan diets before. It had been done on Mediterranean, and it had been done on keto, which is why they know a low quality of these diets are also leading to depression. So I get it, and I see where you're coming from, but I don't want to almost act like I'm dissing them. Like they're not doing as bad as a job as like Saladino, like
100%,
who's
yeah.
out there spreading misinformation. This is purely a study that merits more research.
Yeah.
How can we educate? Because obviously we want to go to, I don't want to say veganism, but we want to go to a whole foods plant-based diet. And that's where maybe this study can come into context, being like, if you follow a vegan diet, you're still susceptible to these certain conditions, like feeling quite down and upset because the foods you're eating maybe still, like, what are you switching to? Have you switched from eating a steak to a Beyond Burger, which has incredible levels of sodium and all these different things? Or are you
It's going to
switching
make
to...
you feel like crap too.
Yeah, are you switching to legumes? It's actually going to make you, you know, feel good, not just for sparing the animal's life, but actually for feeding your body really good nutrition.
Yeah. The thing is, you can eat a vegan diet and be the most unhealthy person in the world. I think, without a doubt, that the most unhealthy diet in the world is a junk food vegan diet. And a heavily processed carbohydrate diet is really bad for you. And it's full of calories and really lacks any nutrition. And these people are probably, if you're eating that, then you probably are depressed. But I think depression, to put it down to a single thing, as into diet, to put it down to diet, that's really trying to simplify something that is incredibly complicated. I just think depression has so many avenues. I can show you so much data on sleep and depression. I can show you so much data on social isolation and depression. I can show you on exercise and depression. Again, it's these pillars. And to say that it's just vegans and vegetarians and it's just something as simple as that, I think that probably, you know...
It's frustrating reductionism.
It is. It's a reductionist view, and it's probably quite frustrating for people who do suffer depression. It's like, well, there's more to it than that. You don't know people's backgrounds. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, you know, to change gear, I could talk about our mutual friend, Sustainable Dish. You know, I actually, because I'm not sure when it was, a few months ago, she posted something about if you really want to help the planet, put down your beans and pick up a steak or something like that. And she said that eating vegetables kills more animals than eating an animal.
Yeah.
Because of the soy crops and etc. Just very classic, blah, blah. And I put it on my story, calling her out, saying this is actually not... I had done the math in the past using a few studies. Nemechek, I think, did a study, and I compiled
I've
like
got
avian...
that same one on my computer, yeah.
Yeah, Nemechek and Poor, and they looked at avian deaths, fish deaths, insect deaths, rodent, especially in like South Australia, have really bad rodent deaths. So they poison them all with the crops, and I compiled all of them, and it turned out to be about 7.6 billion deaths a year in the US from grain growth, but it was just 9 billion chickens alone that were dying for meat. So the math didn't add up.
Yeah.
And so I kind of...
You did your homework.
I did, because I actually got really pissed off when Joe Rogan said it. That was the first time this argument that plants kill more animals than eating an animal, that was the first time I had heard of that. I'm like, no freaking way that's true. So I spent like maybe 6 hours trying to find all the different calculations, and the EPA had calculations, USDA had calculations, and there was a few researchers down in South Australia and some in the US that had calculations. I just put them all together, and I just found the harshest result, and I just compared that to the lowest estimate of animal deaths, and that's all I did. But yeah, I called her out, and she kind of messaged back and forth, and I messaged you about it, and she ended up calling me a racist.
Right.
And this really pissed Shana off as well, because she said to me, "You're racist for recommending a vegan diet. What about the Inuits and the tribes? They can't live on a vegan diet."
That's racist, right?
So I'm racist for recommending a diet that is actually not suited for 100% of the population.
Yeah.
And I already brought this up on the monthly paradigm with Sean, and I was like, this, you know, if you're an Inuit, like, don't listen to this pod. It's probably not for you.
Yeah.
Like, go do your thing. I'm talking to the Western population.
Yeah, the
which
majority.
Is the vast majority.
The vast majority.
I'm not talking to people who cannot afford food.
Yeah.
I'm talking to people who have the luxury of choice, which is, I don't know,
majority of the world.
Very vast majority. I'm not going to throw a percentage out there because I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I'm like, being called a racist, and it's like, it's weird because we watch these documentaries on how the animal agriculture, like what they call it, the slaughterhouses are in the low socioeconomic areas, and all the pesticides and stuff gets joined into their air. They get more cases of cancer, and it's marketed more to people who don't have income because it's cheaper and it's subsidized that way. So then you've got more people in the lower socioeconomic class eating these heart disease ridden foods, and it's like, I'm the racist? Man, I'm telling you,
Yeah.
rice and beans and legumes, the cheapest foods on the planet and the most health promoting.
Yeah, exactly. And well, mate, you can't argue with people like that. She completely blocked me. In her book, I read her book, Sacred
I
Cow.
can't believe you read it. I was going to
Yeah.
just skim through it, but
No, I read the environmental side because I really wanted to see. Like, I don't often get involved in the whole health debate and things like that because to me it's almost irrelevant because, like I said, if we don't look after the planet, then it doesn't matter how healthy you are. As Dr. Katz says, there's no healthy people on a ravaged planet. That's such a good quote. But I thought, how do these people justify that? So that's what I was really interested in. So how do they justify the environmental damage? But there were so many quotes in there. She said that methane is actually has not been increasing for the last 20 years. I can't remember the exact quote, but I put it in inverted commas. I listened to it, put it in inverted commas, sent it to her because it's absolutely increasing. It's going on the charts. So if you look at the EPA, if you look at the CSIRO, you look at NASA, all these graphs showing it's increasing, and livestock's one of the big things. And she talks about biogenic methane versus fossil methane. So just for your listeners, biogenic methane is essentially you're not actually adding another carbon to the atmosphere. So what happens is a carbon will be absorbed by the grass, that the carbon dioxide, that just gets absorbed by the grass. Obviously, photosynthesis. The cow eats the grass, burps methane, and then over a period of time, that methane gets converted back to CO2. So you don't actually add an extra CO2 to the atmosphere.
yeah, but that takes 25
Takes a long
years
time. Yeah,
to convert,
I can't remember the life cycle of methane. It is relatively short lived, but its global warming potential over 20 years is 80. So it's like taking one carbon and turning it into 80 carbons for 20 years. And they say, but it's fine because it's not adding another carbon. And it's the most ridiculous thing. If you look up the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and you look up the Australian Climate Council, so scientific consensus, they say that whilst, yes, it is notable that there is a small difference, and they say slightly, that's in inverted commas, they say slightly, there's a slight difference in the metric emissions from those two sources, but it is not really that notable. And that's it. I'm just like, how can you say that it doesn't have any effect when there is so much science saying the complete opposite? It's insanity. It's denialism, and I just think that you can't really. There's people who still believe the Earth is flat, despite years of quality science and pictures showing that the world's round, but they will never believe it.
Yeah.
I think it's the same with these people.
Do you think the IPCC, the
Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Yeah, yep.
It's always a good tongue twister. Are they probably your highest level proof on that climate change is real? Like, are they the biggest source? Because that's funded by the UN, I believe. Do you know if you were to look at like a hierarchy, like we do with the scientific methodology, they'd probably be the top of the top.
Yeah, well, in my eyes, yeah. I'm not a climate scientist, and I'm sure there'd be people who would have an opinion on this, but we have scientific consensus for everything, and this is where the important part is, because very rarely in science can any one study be as rigorous enough to stand alone in its entirety, and we need multiple studies from multiple sources, from multiple authors, from multiple places around the world coming that produce consistent and reproducible results. And then when we have big groups, consensus groups looking at that data and analysing it, what happens is the individual bias starts to just fade away, and you're left with the wisdom of the crowd. You're left with the scientific consensus, and these people are experts in their field. They've got relevant backgrounds in that field. There's no point putting me on the IPCC consensus panel because I don't study climatology. I'm happy to talk about health and things like that, but what I do is I take my information from these people, and these are the people we should be taking our information from. There's no one more equipped to tell us what's going wrong with the planet than these people. And Diana Rogers, whatever her name is, from Sustainable Dish, she is certainly not equipped to make the claim she has. And if you just do some simple research and you look at what the experts are saying, it's completely flawed. And then when you see these holes start to unfold, you really start to call in her credibility. And straight away I was just like, it's gone for me.
Yeah. Have you amongst that, have you been in touch with what's happening with COP26 at all?
No, not a lot, but I have seen a little bit. I know I kind of feel like these things are a bit of just a show to say, yeah, we're going to do something, and we really need to do something, and then we just never do anything.
Yeah. I've had it on my list to talk to an activist down in Victoria to hopefully get into it, because there's a lot, like 12 days of information. It's hard to bring what happened there into the public light.
Yeah.
12 days of negotiations, of seminars, of Q&As. They ate beef and dairy, by the way, I found out.
I'm sure they did.
It was a huge part of their menu, actually.
I have no doubt.
Which is really frustrating. And actually, from the research I've done, animal ag wasn't even one of the topics.
Yeah.
So it's really frustrating, but we'll go into that another time. I actually was meant to have today more of a Q&A.
Yeah,
so I did put it up on the Instagram story asking if anyone had any questions for you, and I also looked at the comment section a little bit to see what other people were saying and common questions that people come with, and I had quite a fair bit. So we'll see how many we can get through. If we don't get through them all, that's fine.
I'm interested to hear what they are.
All right, so the first one we kind of touched on a little bit actually, but I want to see if you have any other comments on it. So are animals killed in the process of farming vegan foods? Is it possible for a vegan to ensure that no animals were harmed in the production of their food without growing it themselves?
Yeah, I think that this is the thing, right? There's no perfect vegan. You will harm animals regardless of what you eat or what you do. Just by building a house in Australia, you're gonna have to get resources, mining, animals. I'm sure are killed with the process of that. Just the work I do, Tom. Like a lot of the drugs were tested on animals, and a lot of the surgeries were tested on animals, and that's all well and good to say, I'm totally against that. But when it's your family member that gets saved, then it can be pretty amazing what science we can do. So yes, I don't live a cruelty-free life, and I never ever say, and I don't think there's any silver bullet. But when we're talking about ethics and morals, it is the absolute least we can do. And I've got some really good studies that show, and you've obviously done your research on it too, in terms of the crop deaths. Yes, animals will die in the crop deaths, but there's a really nice study I've got, and I can't remember the actual species of rat or rodent that they looked at, but essentially it showed the population density of the rodents before harvest and after harvest, and they're equipped with the same fight or flight response as us, right? So if they hear a huge machine coming that's harvesting the wheat, they don't just sit there and go, "Oh my God, that's it, I'm done." That's not moving that fast. They run. It's exactly the same as us. Yes, okay, I'm sure they will, but this study showed that the population density around harvest time increased significantly on the perimeters of the farms, showing that it decreased the mortality effect of the rats. So it's pretty obvious what happens. Yes, okay, there are crop deaths. Yes, some animals die. Yes, it consumes water. Yes, we need a bit of deforestation with plants. However, when you're talking about a comparison to meat, it's not even comparable, I don't think. And we are locking intelligent animals like pigs in tiny cages, and that is torture, and then we're killing them as well. So we're not only killing them, we're torturing them as well. So I'm happy to take a few incidental crop deaths over the torture and killing of billions of animals, and it's on a way bigger scale than animal agriculture. I'm sure you agree.
Yeah. I don't like being vegan for 6 years or 7 years, something like that. I don't understand the gravity of the amount of animals, and what's even more significant is the sea life that actually.
It's insane.
It's in the trillions per year. So you can't bring yourself to understand that. So animals killed in the process of farming vegan foods, and vegan foods meaning, I'm guessing this person meant like just plants,
vegetables.
yes,
I'm sure there is.
Absolutely. Much like an omnivorous diet would also include the vegetables. So both are contributing. It's just not direct. I think it's what you said, not thinking that there's a silver bullet, because then you just have anxiety, and then you're part of what Taoism, I think it's called, or something, where they literally sweep the floors as they walk.
Oh, right.
And
okay.
they don't even kill an ant, and that's a very different way of life. They only eat the food that had fallen from a tree. They don't eat root vegetables because they don't want to pull it out. So if that's what you're into, perfect. But to be in modern society, I think like you touched on, just do the the best possible job you can to
Yeah.
reduce suffering. Everything else is it's what you can do.
And 2 quotes I can give you. I love quotes. You do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better.
Yeah.
And the other one is, someone can't do everything, but everyone can do something.
Yeah, I
and
love
it's
that.
so true. Just we've got to do something.
Yeah. What are, if any, the downsides to eating a plant-based diet?
Oh,
And I'm guessing this person in particular meant predominantly, or I'm not sure if there's a difference between predominantly and exclusively plant-based diet.
well, you don't get depressed and anxious. I can tell you that much, as we were talking before. Downsides. What are the downsides? I think, to be honest, I'll be completely honest. I think taste is the hardest thing when you start to move to a plant-based diet, because you're used to that really calorie-dense feed. And that's the hard thing. I think for me, cheese was one of the hardest things to give up, and I'm really glad I did give it up, because I think it's the cruelest industry on our planet. But yeah, I don't think there's anything to lose from doing it. Like, I have just felt better. My physical health, I feel great. My endurance, my running, we've talked about this before. You know, I ran 100 Ks and I've done that a few times, feeling great. And I've had small little health problems that have completely just dissolved away. I feel really positive about all the things that I do every day. I feel great when I make those decisions, knowing that it's going to benefit my children. It's going to benefit my kids' children as well, my grandchildren. And so, yeah, I think it's absolutely fantastic. I can't think of any. Can you?
I don't think I can.
It's hard.
Oh, you have one, Sean, please, from the
You
audience?
could probably cut it out if you can't hear me, but it's societal norms.
Yeah, right. So
That is a good point. Yeah.
It's just things with my friendship group, because we are so different now. We're trying to figure out Christmas presents, and they want to get like zoo tickets or aquarium tickets, and I'm just like,
fitting in.
nah, I can't do animals in captivity.
Yeah. So for anyone who didn't hear Sean screaming from the other side of the van,
It's a great point.
Yeah, it's great. It is a great point. It's just fitting in. There's no cons to actually, I think, the health side, which is what I think this person was leading towards, but actually fitting in. So in her example, she's like, if you're getting like joint gifts for someone, she's like, we can't do like zoos. What about getting like grazing boxes? You don't want meat in there or dairy in there. And what about going out for like, I don't know, doing like a voucher for an ice cream place? It's like, where's that line? So that's a little bit blurred, and you have to make that decision for yourself. But that is, definitely your society and your surroundings is definitely something to think about.
Yeah, I've lost friends, but to be honest, as I've sort of gone through life, my values have completely changed, and I've made new friends that I prefer way more. So, it's one of those things that surround yourself with people that really add something to your life. I've eliminated a number of people that have just not added anything to my life, and it's the best thing I ever did. So, and right now, like I said, I feel very positive about it. I've got some beautiful friends, and to be honest, I've decreased my friend circle. But I've improved the friendships that I have in that circle. And
quality over quantity.
100%. Yep, 100%.
I love that. The next one is pretty funny. It's kind of like what we were talking about before, but why, when you say you are vegan, do some people become aggressive/rude?
So I've done a talk about this. This is a psychology of veganism, right?
Oh, please.
I love this stuff, and I love psychology. I should have been a psychologist. I did study it for a year. But essentially what we're doing, we're talking about morality, right? And so what is right and what is wrong. And all of us, at the end of the day, want to come home, look in the mirror and say, I'm a good person. I've done the right thing. I think that deep down, majority of people, especially in our society today, they know that it is cruel. So that they have seen it. You'd have to have your eyes shut every day for the last 10 years to not see what vegans are talking about, and they have a point. When you start to say you're vegan to someone, it challenges their morals, and without you even saying it, what it does is it challenges the fight or flight response in that person's brain. The amygdala is flooded with noradrenaline, adrenaline, and you get a fight or flight response. and it's a protection mode, and it's a defense mode, and it feels like a personal attack. I can tell you right now, I've had times where I've been out eating a meal, and just by ordering a vegan burger, that challenges people's morals. I've had these things happen with mates, with close mates, and to be honest, it's a really crazy emotional response that people get, and I think it's all just people shutting down, wanting to say, no, I'm not a bad person, because deep down they kind of know that they're responsible for what their actions are, right? So they're responsible. They don't want to take responsibility for what happened to that animal, I think. So yeah, that's sort of the short story of it all, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's definitely there.
Yeah.
Not saying that people are bad at all, but
no.
people have a conscience, and they know that 3 times a day they can make that choice. They know they have a choice to not be rude to the waitress. They know they have a choice to actually, whether or not they want to give money to a homeless person or not. And life's filled with choices. So if you start to slowly think that you're making the wrong choice by ordering this animal, you're going to obviously have your actions are not going to be congruent with your values.
Yeah.
Which I think most people value being a good person. You know, like you said, you want to come home, you want to say you're a good person. Now, when that starts becoming out of balance, you start to have 2 personalities. Because you're like, I'm a good person, but maybe my actions don't always align, and then that starts to conflict. And Don Miguel Ruiz puts it really eloquently. It's like you're just battling, and the further away these 2 personalities get, the harder your life will become.
Yeah, I totally agree.
There seems to be more and more vegans around. Is it making a difference?
Yeah, definitely. I listened to Gerard. Oh God, what's his last name? I can't remember his last name. I'm sorry, Gerard. I've lost everyone's last names now.
That's all right. We'll go first name basis.
He was on the Animal Justice Party talk yesterday.
Okay.
Fantastic, a fantastic environmental scientist, but he's talking about exponential curves and how we're just sort of at the brink of it. We're at the start of our exponential curve, and we're starting to really ramp up. I think it's making a huge difference, and I think what makes a big difference is, and this relates to that whole everyone attacking you as soon as you say you're vegan. You just need to. I just stopped trying to change people. But I can sit there now without any emotion and just say exactly the reasons why I'm vegan, and I can just say to people exactly what I think.
How do you say it? Like when someone's like, why are you vegan, Andrew?
I say I'm vegan for the environment, for the planet, for the animals, and for myself. And I said, to be honest, one day I think my little boys are going to grow up. They're going to ask me, why is our planet in such bad shape? And I want to be able to put my hand on my heart, look them back in the eye and say, I did everything I possibly could. And so if that means that I need to sacrifice my taste buds for their future, then that's what I will do. And I will choose the environment and their future over anything. I think that's the thing about being a parent, is to provide, protect your family. And at the end of the day, the evidence is crystal clear. It's crystal clear. You cannot deny it. A whole food plant-based diet is easily the best for the planet. So I think it's those 4 big reasons. But you need to say it in a compassionate way. You need to have compassion, because these people have been. If you just go straight on the offense, people will shut down. The amygdala.
You're a murderer.
Yeah, the amygdala will fire off, and you're done. It needs to be emotionless. You need to say, look, I really understand. And the one thing I do say, I used to be a massive carnivore. I used to eat meat, and so you normalize it. You relate to them, and that's important too. And just have an understanding where people's coming from. They're all in a different stage of change. You know, the 5 stages of change: pre-contemplation, contemplation, all those things. So you need to just broach it to people, and they will eventually come around.
Yeah, I think firstly, I'll just add, luckily you don't have to sacrifice your taste buds.
You don't have to.
You don't
really.
have to, because we have spices and herbs and amazing food and beautiful vegetables and fruits that are sweet, and we start salivating when we see fresh fruit. So thank goodness for that.
So true. Great point. And your taste buds do change.
They do.
Oh my God, they change.
So it's within.
I used to hate soy milk. Now
Really?
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it, mate.
I've never drank. I don't think I've ever drank it by itself, like a full cup, just like I used to.
Oh, smash it by the carton.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
I haven't got man boobs either. So.
Nah, not your soy boobs. I think it was something like every 10 days, your whole taste buds can completely change. Especially
Yeah,
a
I
good
have no
opportunity
doubt.
is when you burn yourself, all your taste buds like die, and when you burn certain areas, you'll actually taste food very differently. We're actually currently going through How Not to Diet by Gregor,
Yeah, I haven't read it yet.
on Audible. It's really fun to listen to. Obviously,
Yeah.
his voice. It's, I don't know. I'd say it's a good book for a beginner, but it's a long book. It's a
Yeah.
lot of. I think it's 22 hours.
Phew.
It's a long.
Goodness me. Yeah, I
long,
can't
long
sit through
book. Like
books
we
that
drove
long.
up to the top of Australia. I don't even
Yeah.
know if we finish it by the time we get to the bottom.
Yeah, that's a long time, mate.
It's-
Wow.
It's a big
Yeah.
book. Yeah, some really good points there. Actually, just to reiterate a few more points, there's actually a study. I actually read it. The guys at veganeasy.org sent it through to me, and I asked them what the stat was, and they sent me beefcentral.org, but they linked the actual study, and Australian meat consumption is down 5.5% from 2019.
Yeah, right. That's
Yeah.
good. See,
So-
that's
and
starting to
there's
happen.
another
now.
source that now says vegans and vegetarian make up 12% of our population.
Yeah, it's getting stronger.
Yeah.
And people are not just vegan and vegetarian; they're actually
Reductionists.
reductionists, which is good. You got to reward that, and
Yeah. I actually should ask earlier when you said, is there any doubt, when we asked, is there any downsides to a plant-based diet? But how does it feel to be healthy?
feels really good. It feels really good. Yeah, I think health is such a broad concept, right? Mental health, physical health. Yeah,
But I'm more, I think with this person, what they were kind of going for is like, when you make that switch to a plant-based diet, or maybe when you start meditating, what are the physical and mental things that you're feeling or thinking to show that, okay, I'm really starting to get in a good flow with life, with my body, with my relationships, with etc.
Yeah, look, I think that's, oh goodness, it's a very complicated question because
Come on, Dr. Andrew, you can do it.
because I feel like I certainly did feel physically better once I started eating healthy, and that certainly improved my outlook. But I feel like I have to really throw sleep and meditation and mindset in there, and also social connections, because that put them all together, and that's what I see as health. And now, when I come home to a happy family, and I always walk in the door to a beautiful family that's really happy, and I work on my marriage every day. I work on being a father, and then I fill my body with the right foods, and then I make sure that we're ready to go to sleep. So I'm getting that 8 hours sleep, and I wake up, I feel refreshed. I think that's a really good point. When you wake up in the morning, it is hard because I've got kids, but I still do feel good. I've got lots of energy. I don't ever feel tired. I go kite surfing. I go to the gym. I ride my bike to work every day, and I feel good. And I come home and I feel happy. And I don't think there's one feeling for happiness. But the one thing that I would say, and this is the monk philosophy, right? It's not about feeling happy or feeling that pleasurable feeling every day. What the monks would say is the absence of worry, or the absence of illness, or the absence of something. You'll never ever be euphoric and happy every day. You'll always have days where you feel down.
Yeah.
But the most important thing to strive for is the absence of worry, I believe. That's how I go for it.
I love that, and it's a simple way to look at it, because
Yeah.
that absence of worry can hit through all the different categories. Hit through nutrition. You don't need to worry about feeling deficient. You don't need to, waking up really ready for the day is the easiest probably determinant, because it's physical. It's
Yeah,
hard
you
because
can't-
we're not a very mindful society per se. I would say we're nowhere near
Absolutely
saying
not.
mindful or woke.
No
Anyone who
way
thinks
near
they're
it.
woke,
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
I don't know, man. Are you?
Yeah.
But having energy in the morning without coffee and other stimulants, that's, I think, what you touched on, a really, really
I
good
agree.
point.
I agree.
Next one's an interesting one. It's a bit topical.
Yeah, go.
Would you eat cell-based meat?
Yeah, look, I wouldn't eat it as a health food. I think ethically it ticks all the boxes. Yep, I think you can't, like we said before, we touched on this before, you can't have grains without some sort of death. Yes, there are crop deaths, and I've mentioned this to vegans before, and people are like, "Oh my God, are you using that argument?" I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm saying this is an argument in favour of veganism. There are animals that will die with vegetables and with crops and things. So, if you're going to say that cell cultured meat is cruel, then you probably shouldn't eat anything really. Like I don't know what the exact process is, and I haven't seen it, but from what I understand, they take stem cells. And from what I can see in the hospital, when we do stem cells, we can do it completely painless for these people. So I don't, unless there was any reason someone could get, I'm always open to changing my mind. And I think that's the definition of a scientist or someone who's able to, once they're presented with factual information that contradicts their belief, I can change my behaviors to suit that belief. Will I go out and start eating cell-based meat every day of the week? Absolutely not. If someone came to me and said, "Hey, here's a cell-based steak, do you want to try it?" I would say, "All right, well, I might give it a go," unless something changes, you know. Yeah.
Well, for anyone who's interested in cell-based meat, I did an episode with Dr. Jadira Saldana. She founded Cellular Agriculture Canada, who kind of, from my memory, help out cell startups. And how she explained it to me was, it's literally as simple as a cotton swab through a pig's ear.
It's amazing.
The pig is alive, no problem to the pig. Sometimes they can take, I think she said like feces even. Sometimes they can just take a feather.
You're telling me the steak comes from poo?
Maybe. It could be the feather of a chicken.
Yeah.
That's all it takes. This chicken's alive. The feathers naturally fall off. They said they could just pick it up off the ground.
It's amazing what we can do in science.
They can create it in these brewery-like facilities where they literally grow it in a petri dish. So from what I understand, unless again someone could prove me wrong, it is completely cruelty free.
And I didn't stop eating meat and dairy because I didn't like the taste.
Yeah.
I will sit here and say that openly. People can say whatever they like, but I'm always happy to be honest. It was not taste. I loved the taste, but I just realised that there was the environment was worth more than my taste buds. That's for sure.
Yeah, I love that. Next one's an interesting one. If 80% whole foods plant-based is generally good for your health, why would anyone go to 100%?
Yeah, well, this is what I would say, is that if I purely wanted to think about things from a health perspective, then I think 80 to 90% whole food plant-based diet is fine, and you could eat 10, 20% meat and dairy. However, this is why the arguments further than that, and this is where it comes down to ethics, to the environment, and zoonotic disease is another big one, right? So when you start to add up them, then I have no doubt in my mind that we should be 100% vegan. If you want to do the right thing, if you want to do the absolute right thing from those perspectives, then you should be 100% plant-based, 100% vegan. So yeah, but 80% is fine for health, I would say.
Yeah, it's a lot of grey areas, and the question is a little bit. It's like, yes, if you're nutrition only, which some people follow in whole food plant-based, they are, which is fine. Add your fish or whatever if you're just focusing on health. But if we're looking at environment, there's so much more, and you can't think of things as so reductionist. Like if we were to build a van, it's not just getting wood. It's where did that wood come from? What about the resources? Are we wasting wood? Offcuts, where are they going? And you can't. It's so much more complicated than the way it is, because we live in such a gratifying society in which somehow we just get things in front of us. We went out to a restaurant and just food in exchange for this digital thing, and you can't. I think as you grow older, especially as the world is slowly trying to kill us with climate change because we're killing it, we have to understand that everything has an equal opposite reaction. You need to make sure you're not creating bad reactions.
Oh, 100%, mate. I really liked what you just said then, was that the planet's trying to kill us because we're trying to kill it. Like, it's true. It's almost like get out of here.
Yeah. The next one's actually really interesting, and I actually don't know if I've talked about this on the show. How does being vegan address world hunger?
So this is classically, we always, I don't know the exact stats. It's not my area of expertise, but we're feeding 70. So I did a post on this the other day. More people die from overeating than people who die from undereating. That's from the World Health Organization. Mm-hmm. So, and this is a thing, right? We are in a calorie surplus. We're eating so much food. I forget, it's like 40 or 30% of the population is overweight or obese. It's insane amounts. And there are people who are starving. And I just don't get that. And then the inefficiency. So you take that. So we're obviously eating too much. We're eating too many calories.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that much right now in my practice because I don't see too many slim, healthy people. But then you throw on top of that the inefficiency of the food system where we're taking plant protein and it's just being eaten by these animals, and then we're converting into an animal protein, which is a very inefficient process. It's like our energy system, I don't know what a good analogy would be, but you're better off getting your energy directly from the source. And it's just these animals are consuming so much grain, and with that grain, we could feed all the human beings on Earth. We could feed them 10 times over. People say to me all the time, it's just because of overpopulation, like the population's the problem. It's not the population that's a problem, because you look up the stats, you look at the places like in Rwanda that have millions of people, and their CO2 emissions per capita, per person, is so low. They don't consume anything. The problem is Western culture. We overeat, we overconsume, we want everything yesterday, and that's the problem. Yeah.
You know what's so funny? I've actually never done the math on this, so I might nerd out for a post, but they say like there's lots of different facts, but the world at its current pace could hold like 10 to 11 billion. I wonder if we had changed to a predominantly or exclusively plant-based diet, if that could increase to 15 to 20 billion, or what the different numbers would be, because we'd have so much, like 50% of all arable land, which is non-ocean and ice, is devoted to agriculture. So Simon Hill really puts it best, or is it Nick Carter, that we kind of just live on a big farm.
Yeah.
Really a big floating farm. And
it is.
We've
just literally destroyed the planet for our food system.
Yeah, so it just makes me think, how much more could we really do? And you're right, but it's the frustrating thing about climate change, and this is it's such a vanilla thing to say, but it's not affecting me. Well, that's the point. You're over here over-consuming, and people in Nepal are literally dying because they can't afford to buy their fruit, because they have... A lot of Nepal is what you call sustenance farming, which is they farm to feed their family, and any extra gets sold to fund their housing and whatnot. And these farmers are getting their whole crop fields destroyed from floods, which is increasing year on year. Same is happening in Africa. They're getting their crops just decimated because of flash flooding, and people are just dying because you're living a too comfortable of a life.
Yeah, and that's the sad part. It's going to be that third world that really suffer because of our greed. Greed is the key word. We're just so greedy. We're greedy for calories. We're greedy for resources. We just want to accumulate as much as we can, and money just making the world go round. It's really sad, and that's that's where the depression comes from. When you start to look at it, you look at the world for what it is. I always joke, and I always say my wife was Morpheus from the Matrix. She gave me
the red pill.
Is it the red pill or the blue pill? I think it's the red pill. I think
actually.
it's the red pill. The red pill is the one that it takes you out of the Matrix. And once you come out of that Matrix, you can't unsee it. And it becomes, you just start to think, Jesus Christ, I shouldn't say that. There could be some religious people. You start to say, well, wow, there's there's some really bad stuff going on in the world.
Yeah, there is. But I guess I think slowly, as I'm educating myself and interviewing more people, I do seem to find myself being a lot more pessimistic about things. But at the same time, I know the math is there.
Yeah.
Physiologically and physically, it's possible.
Yeah.
It's 100% possible. Will the countries pull the plug from their butts? I'm not sure. And really kind of lead the charge. And there's a lot of really cool stuff happening, and part of the monthly paradigm, so if anyone hasn't tuned into that, it's really cool. It's where we go through the news and whatnot, and we kind of go through good news stories, and there's a few really cool ones that are things like a lot of countries are really reducing their meat intake. So, Sean, do you remember which country it was that's funding like plant agriculture? I think it was Sweden or Norway put in like a $6 billion plant fund to fund plant-based farmers only, because They just knew that was the way of the future. So they took the subsidies away from animal agriculture and then put it to plant agriculture. And certain things like that can happen. So the best and the worst thing of knowing this whole desperate situation we're in is knowing that it can get fixed if humans decide they want to fix it, which starts with you and me.
Oh, mate, you are spot on. And this is the thing. We're such a reactive society. We are not proactive at all. And the best analogy I can give you is the smoker who you sit there and you tell them repeatedly, you need to stop smoking or you get lung cancer. And then you come into the anaesthetic clinic and they're sitting in front of me and they're about to have their lung cut out. And I say, are you smoking? Do you still smoke? Nah, I quit. When did you quit? Oh, just yesterday. And it's like, what is going on? I just can't see it. We're so reactive, right? We're happier to open up the chest and cut out a bit of lung than we are to go, you know what, I'm just going to give up smoking. We lack that foresight. And I just think everyone sits there and points their fingers and goes, oh my God, smokers, it's such a stupid thing to do. But the rest of the world's doing the same thing. We are smoking the planet. We are giving the planet lung cancer. And we know it. We've been told it by everyone. And we are just like, well, I'm not going to change.
Yeah, it's really a strange paradox, and I don't really know the solution to it in terms of human psyche. There has to be a psychologist out there that just knows the right thing to say or do, because you kind of just want to slap sense into people sometimes. I forgot where I was going with my point.
I think this is where it comes into the...
Oh,
yeah.
Go.
No, go. You got it. Go.
People, it's you want everything now. Right now, I lost it.
Oh, I've done that before, don't worry. I was going to say it's about the mesolimbic pathway, right? I think this is where it all comes down to in the brain, the dopamine reward pathway. And we think we are this incredibly intelligent species. However, we are the only species that actively destroys its planet, so its home. So I would argue it's not really the case, but we are driven by our reward pathway. Dopamine is our reward pathway, and food stimulates it, sleep stimulates it, exercise, sex, drugs, all these things can artificially stimulate it, and we are just driven by that. And our paycheck stimulates that. Our phones stimulate it. We're on our phones. It gives us a dopamine release. We can look at through functional MRI studies that every time you send a text back, you get a dopamine release. This is why when on WhatsApp it says Tom's typing back, so I'm like, I'm ready for it because I'll get a dopamine hit when you send me a text, right?
Yeah,
so
that's people usually get a dopamine hit when I send them a text, right?
But we can't override that. A lot of us. I think there are certain people who can, but for the most part, I think people have a trouble doing that.
You know what? I totally agree. And I remember what I was going to say. Well, during our big listen of How Not to Diet, there's a lot of surgeries in America and in Australia that have come out in hopes to make people lose weight. And Americans are a lot more overweight and obese than Australians. We're looking at about 60% of their population and above. And they came out with a lot of these surgeries from Asia and different... So they found, I forgot what the exact pathway was, but it was part of their intestine that actually signified satiation. So they actually decided to cut, I think it was like 70% of the intestine out of their body, so that when something goes in, you feel fuller quicker. And so after about 15,000 of these operations, people started to get liver failure. And they realized that chopping out 70% of your small intestine wasn't a good thing.
Not a good idea.
So it's just funny how far people will go. They'll literally chop out the organs in their body to lose a bit of fat. And that's not to the people's fault. Like, it is a little bit, but like butter is back. Like, is it really? Like, we're so disillusioned and it's become so hard to break through the barrier that we're after quick fixes. I almost believe for a moment that we're after quick fixes because it's like, oh, that doesn't work, I have to go to the next thing, and we have to just navigate life through these series of trial and errors.
Oh, yeah, spot on. And this is the thing, this is where misinformation, these industries, manufacturing ignorance, they manufacture misinformation, they create doubt, and butter is back and all that stuff, saturated fats and back on the menu. It's just insanity, and I just feel so sorry for the average person who just has so much trouble trying to sift through that garbage and what they have to do. and they go through all these operations. They're desperate to try all these diets when I think the answer is so simple. Yeah.
I think that's actually a really good segue to my last question that I had up here. Why do some people think carbs make you fat?
Oh, the old carbs. Do carbs make you fat? As I always say, it's funny. It's so funny when people say carbs make you fat and they're like, no, vegans are too skinny. When we eat a lot of carbs, right? So
Yeah.
I just think that is hilarious. It makes me laugh. I think that it probably comes from the fact that, eating, like, I have no doubt if you're eating, I know who's really good at this is Garth Davis.
Yeah. He wrote a book on it.
He wrote a book on it. He's a very smart guy. And he's...
Thanks for listening to the show, Garth. We appreciate you.
If he's taken the time, he's a busy man. But he's an exceptional guy. And for an up-and-coming doctor like myself, I'm sort of in the late stages of my training. I got 2 months to go. Having someone like Garth around is really nice to have a mentor. Like, not so much been a mentor, but someone to look up to and go, wow, look at this guy. He's well established and very, very intelligent. But he could talk about this all day, I have no doubt, and I don't think I could. I wouldn't have the knowledge on it. But I just think it's a misconception we've had. People think that carbs make you fat, and I've got no doubt that if you're eating just crap, then yes, it will make you fat. But it's just people are eating the wrong foods. Carbohydrates are the most essential thing for the body. What I can tell you is physiology, and the body will preference carbohydrates in the Krebs cycle over anything. So to make ATP, which is the adenosine triphosphate, which is our basal energy unit in the body that makes muscles contract, that does all the wonderful things, it's our battery source, it's our thing that gives us life. The body will preference carbohydrates over anything in the world. A mother, when they're pregnant, has a hormone that will be secreted that will increase insulin resistance in the mother. So therefore, it creates more glucose in the mother's bloodstream to protect the baby, so it doesn't become glucose deplete. These are all classic protective mechanisms. We had carbohydrates are so important. The body can take proteins, it can take fats, and make glucose, can make carbohydrates. It's the only fuel source for the brain. People will say, what about ketones? That's a survival instinct. That is not ideal. You do not want to be in ketosis. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. The body does not want to be in ketosis. Sorry to all the keto fans. But carbohydrates are life. They're the best. They produce the most amount of ATP per molecule. So they're the most efficient energy source. End of story.
Okay,
yeah,
that's a wrap. All right, people, everyone, we're good. We've gone to the Dr. Andrew Little University. No, I think what you touched on really well is the misconception. So when we're talking carbohydrates, just to add to that, it's a food group. We're not saying fruit makes you fat. We're not saying vegetables make you fat. So if we look at carbohydrates, we could claim multiple things. We could claim burgers are carbohydrates, even though they're probably majority fat.
Yeah.
We could say pizza's a carbohydrate. We could say fruits are a carbohydrate. We could say veggies. We could say, even though there are a lot of protein, we could say legumes are carbohydrates. They all have carbohydrates, different type of carbohydrates. There's simple, there's complex, there's resistant starches. There's all these different things that come into play. So you can't just say carbs make you fat or carbs make you skinny. It's like, where'd you get the carbs from?
Yeah.
So exactly, I think that's the more important question.
Totally.
Is it coming
it's a
from
really nice
fruit?
way to say it.
There's if you eat fruit straight for 7 days, which is a very potent source of carbohydrate, we've got like it's probably very close to like 80-10-10, so 80% carbs, 10% fat, 10% protein. Around there, some fruits might be 99-10 or whatever it may be, but if you eat 80% carbs for a whole week, my very solid guess is that you will lose weight.
Yeah. And you just it's essentially a calorie deficit, right? You need to. It's all about calories in, calories out, and that's the simple thing. And unfortunately, through human bias and the flaws of our brain, we just tend to, we always say, "Oh, I am in a calorie deficit," but are we really? Well, then I don't think so.
I feel like I'm not eating that much.
Yeah.
You don't know until you put it to the test and you start tracking yourself.
Yes, that's a Gregor. That's a Gregor. Yeah. So I remember
too much of him.
I remember living with a a girl at university who would come home from Brisbane, and she would be sitting on the couch with a litre iced tea,
Oh my god.
drinking it and saying, "I just can't work out. I can't lose weight." And I'm not saying everyone was like that, but that is, I was just sitting there going, "Do you know how many calories?" I remember going for a big ride once. We went for a ride up Springbrook. Have you been up Springbrook here? Huge hill. So I went up there, had my little calorie counter as to how many calories I'm burning riding up this hill.
Yeah.
Come back down. I got quite hypoglycemic because I get hypoglycemic pretty readily when I'm doing endurance stuff, so I have to watch my sugars. And I must metabolize stuff quite readily, hey? Because anyway, I just pulled over, grabbed an iced coffee, and just sculled it just to get some sugar back in my. And I looked at the calories, and that 500 ml of it was an iced tea. It was back when I was consuming meat and dairy. This is like we're talking 10 years ago. I remember looking at it, going, "That's the exact same amount of calories that I just took." I just 2-hour ride up that hill. I came back and I just replaced it with that one little thing. It's insane, like. The food industry, this is where it comes back to the dopamine. And this is the mesolimbic pathway we're talking about. Food stimulates it, and calorie-dense foods stimulate it more than other foods like lettuce and things like that. So the brain is not silly. It is in a survival of the fittest mode from evolution. If you believe in evolution, I do. I'm a scientist, of course I do. But if you believe in evolution, then having access to a calorie-dense feed would give you a survival benefit over someone else. So you are rewarded when you find calorie-dense food. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think what's really cool is that last time we kind of touched on, do people even still drink dairy? And you kind of touched on coffee, like people have it with their coffee and you're having a litre every few days. And then the same kind of concept comes in true with this, like especially with coffee. And I think when I was 16, 17, 18, I was eluded from this. But then you realize when you get to like, when you see 30-year-olds and 35-year-olds and 40-year-olds and they're not looking after their body and they're reliant on stimulants such as iced coffee, especially tradies and their Red Bulls and whatnot, and you're smacking down, let's say 2-3 coffees a day, which sounds like a lot, but it's really not.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people who listen to this show are quite health conscious.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we know people in our lives that are very reliant on stimulants. And if we're looking at coffee, let's say we're even vegan. Let's say we're having a soy flat white 3 times a day. That's 200-300 calories per coffee.
Yeah.
Like, yes, we're getting protein. Yes, we're getting things, but that's still a lot of calories. And if you're trying to lose weight, that might not be very helpful. Now, if you're eating a lot of carbs, is it the carbs? Probably not. Maybe you're just having too much and you're not being mindful. It's the little things. Are you adding tomato sauce? Tomato sauce, what is that? Carbs.
Yeah.
Now, would I say tomato
Processed
sauce is
carbs
health
too, by
food
the way.
or good for weight loss? No, absolutely not.
It's from a tomato, though.
It's from a tomato.
Just a plant.
1% tomato. That's really funny.
Yeah.
At the beginning, you actually mentioned the AJP conference.
Yeah.
Which is actually happening. Oh, it finished today.
Yeah, it finished tonight.
A lot of awesome people were on there. I saw the lineup looked pretty good. Our good mate Jimmy, Dara Hayes, lots of really cool people there. And you mentioned you couldn't really get through yours. It was a bit of a technical difficulty.
Yeah, there was a little technical glitch there, which we're hoping to rectify. So I've spoken to management. They gave me a call. It was a little bit disappointing because I put a lot of work into the talk, and I really wanted to do a nice talk, essentially based around it's like your next level vegan, right? So when you entry level vegan, you come in and you feel like you got this armory, right? And you go, I know animal agriculture, number one cause of deforestation, it's number one cause of greenhouse gas emissions, or it's a leading cause of greenhouse gas emissions, it's number one cause of this and that and everything. And you come up with all these things, and then you get the Diana Rogers. Is it Diana Rogers? I don't know. I can't remember. Sustainable dish. Sustainable dish. Yeah, these people who come in, they take your arguments on board, and then they fire back counter arguments, and they sound convincing. And
they do sound convincing. That's so. I agree.
It sounds incredibly convincing. And I remember hitting roadblocks constantly through my pathway to becoming vegan. And or everyone's like, oh, the meat made the human brain evolve, so you need meat. Or, maybe soy gives you man boobs. And you hear, they're all very, very easy to dispel. But some of these big ones, like Alan Savory, like we've spoken about before, and this whole biogenic versus fossil methane. And
it's very technical. Like the average person, if you go and we have a conversation about biogenic methane, I'm not going to have as much of a foundation as someone else, and I would consider myself educated on the topic.
I would definitely consider you educated on the topic.
And I still wouldn't have much of a grant. And maybe that's why they kind of are going for straws there, looking at very, very specific 1%ers.
It's a classic characteristic of pseudoscientists. So it's technobabble. They come up with technobabble, yeah. So it's a characteristic of pseudoscientists. If you look at the characteristics of pseudoscientists, you'll see some very big commonalities for old Alan Savory for Sustainable Dish, and those sorts of things. They make these things that sound very scientific. You'll hear it. What's his name? Pete Evans and his COVID laser that. I don't know, all this garbage.
I'm not sure. I'm not
all this garbage.
That.
Have you never seen these COVID laser?
No.
He's got something. He's selling it for like 40
Sounds
grand
cool.
or something. Yeah, it's really good.
Very cool. Does it give you COVID or does it cure COVID?
I can't even remember the words he used to describe it. But this is the thing. They sound great, right? They sound really good. The the Himalayan rock salt crystal that is going to emit ions or do all these wonderful things. They all sound good and I don't see Alan Savory's holistic grazing as any different. It's pseudoscience. Diana Rogers, her book Sacred Cow, it is pseudoscience, and that's what the whole point of this talk is to give people some good ammunition to rebut their rebuttals.
Yeah,
because it's a next level vegan, right? You've got to get to that point where you can go. They firing them back at you and you can go, well, no, this is why you're wrong. And here's the holes. Here's the massive hole in your argument. And when you see those holes start to unfold, their credibility comes into question. And for me, the environmental argument, I just had to read a little bit of Diana Rogers. I read her whole environmental part, but just little things she said, like when she said methane is not increasing. I was like, how can you even say that? It's just denialism at its greatest. And then to say that biogenic methane does not have an effect on climate change because you're not adding an extra carbon to the planet, that's just insanity again, when the scientific consensus is stating otherwise. And this is why consensus is important, and we need to follow the professionals in their field, not Alan Savory, not Diana Rogers. We need to follow the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. We need to listen to the American College of Cardiology when it comes to our what they recommend for our saturated fat intake, not Carnivore MD Paul Saladino. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. Don't listen to me on it either. Don't listen to Andrew Little on what you should be eating. I'm not a dietitian or a nutritionist. I'm an anaesthetist. If you want me to put you to sleep and get you through a surgery, definitely. But the things that I do have and I have been skilled in is learning how to interpret science, and that's the most important part.
Yeah, I love that. Well, having that next level of being, I guess, vegan, or let's use the word educated on certain topics, what are some of your key points that you would have gone through that you can leave us with?
So the big one was the biogenic methane. We spoke a little bit about that. Another one was, what I talked about was, you always hear Paul Saladino or Sean Baker talking about there's no quality evidence and that supports a whole food plant-based diet, or there's no experimental studies in particular that show that a meat-based diet is bad for the body. And so what they're talking about, broadly speaking, we're talking about when we think in categories of research or studies, we've got experimental versus observational. So a lot of our data is observational, but they will obviously say that correlation doesn't prove causation. Yes, correlation doesn't prove causation, but it implies causation, and that what they're doing is that's an over-application of that rule, and that's a fallacy in itself. So essentially, where was I going with that? I can't remember.
Dispelling the myths. So there's correlation, causation, and then you're talking about...
Of course, yeah. So we divide it broadly into experimental and observational data. So they'll say that if you look at the evidence hierarchy, we've got meta-analysis, systematic reviews at the top. We'll just not talk about them for a second, but then we've got experimental studies, so randomized control trials, and then under that, a list of observational data. So they'll say because experimental trials are the pinnacle of the evidence hierarchy, that's what we want. We want meta-analysis, systematic reviews of randomized controlled trials. What we've got, and a lot of the evidence we have, is systematic reviews or meta-analyses of cohort studies. And which thing is, there's some really good strengths to cohort studies. Experimental studies have some absolute flaws too. So, we're trying to control a system, so we lose. It's not really a natural environment. So controlling for variables is ideal, but it definitely has its flaws, and at times it's very unethical to conduct a randomized control trial. We can't randomize people to a smoking group because we know that it's going to cause cancer. I can't just take you and Shana and say, okay, you're going to be in the smoking group. You're not, and let's just see if you get lung cancer. That's completely unethical because we know through a lot of epidemiology, a lot of studies, like animal trials and things like that. Yes, I know they're bad, but this is where it all came from, that we know that smoking causes lung cancer. So you can't do that. Whereas observational data is great. We can take a huge amount of information in a very short period of time. We're taking cohorts of thousands of people. And we're analysing that data, and we're doing regression analysis, so very complicated statistical analysis that goes way over my head, that I wouldn't even begin to understand. I can only understand surface level statistics, and we're coming up with trends, and we're saying that the correlation implies a causation, and that's the part is that the take home message is that you can't just rule one out. But what they are very complementary. So experimental data is complementary to observational data. And when they point in the same direction, it gives us some really solid clues as to where we should be looking and where we should be going. And that's the important point. So that's where we sort of touched on some studies. We also touched on a little bit about saturated fat and scientific consensus. So looking at the European Society European Society of Cardiology and the American College of Cardiology, the American Heart Association, and just their consensus statements on saturated fats. So
saturated fat's a pretty easy one to kind of. I can't believe that's still getting argued. That's a lot simpler. What's actually really funny, and I was trying to look up the name while we're going here. While we were in Gladstone, like last week or 2 weeks ago, there was a study that came out, and we when we're talking about the hierarchy, one of the bottom ones, we're talking like very small group, even anecdotal, lowest being expert opinion, and then we're kind of going up from there, and one of the lowest ones being surveys, so kind of like that vegan one we talked about at the beginning. So it's it's useful, but where did you get your group from? There's lots of different factors. It's not very, like, you can't lean on that as evidence.
And you said they recruited through Facebook,
Twitter, and LinkedIn.
Yeah, okay.
So there was a Carnivore one that came out, and this is hilarious. I can't tell you whether I laughed or was so frustrated when it came out, because I saw all the Carnivore people posting it. I've forgotten exactly how many people, but they pretty much got a survey, very similar kind of system, and they looked at how much meat a person eats and what self-proclaimed disease they reversed. So this is not a doctor saying you've reversed this disease.
Yeah.
This is purely, hey, I'm eating all this meat, I'm feeling better. And they recruited people from, I think the Facebook page was called Carnivore for Life or something like that, like something that's definitely not biased at all. And what they actually found, which was hilarious, not only were the people that felt the best not carnivore, they were eating fruit and veg.
Yeah.
So they pumped it up as this carnivore study. I think it was only like 50 people or something like that through this Facebook group, and they weren't even real carnivores. And these carnivore groups that don't even like
epidemiology.
Not even these studies that actually, not even this huge epic Oxford study, none of that stuff, but they'll take this small Facebook group that's obviously not biased. So it kind of goes on this huge thing. It's like, it doesn't matter with these people as long as it's confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias is the mother of all bias.
Like, that study was probably one of the worst conducted studies I've read in a very long time. I'm not amazing at reading things, but I can cut through the BS really quickly. If you're telling me it's coming from a Facebook group like that, well, what's the quality here?
Yeah. And this is the thing. I think is so important. Like we said, we're in a world of misinformation, that data asphyxiation, like we said before, and industry are very clever. They spend so much time now on devising a study and showing the outcome that they want, which that's the definition of
like this is a hypothesis. How can we work backwards to achieve that?
That's what science is.
Yep.
Science is we start with a hypothesis. We start with a null hypothesis. So we say there is no effect. And then we have to conduct an experiment to try and prove ourselves wrong, which is the most unbiased way you can do it. Yeah. What you do in pseudoscience is you start with a conclusion and you go, how am I going to design the experiment to give me that conclusion? Yeah. And I'm telling you right now, the tobacco industry did it. Fossil fuel industry have been doing it. So I watched the other day on a great documentary, and it showed the tobacco industry had actually genetically modified these rats. So what they did back in the day when they was looking at smoking, they put rats in a box, poor bloody rats, and they filled them with smoke. And the rats got lung cancer, right? And then, so to create doubt, the tobacco industry then found these genetically modified rats that were actually very resistant to the tobacco smoke. So they genetically modified them in some way. I don't know. It's very, very clever stuff. And showed that there was an association with tobacco, with smoke inhalation. Wow. And so it's clever what they can do, right? And they can come up with all sorts of things. The meat and dairy industry with saturated fat, they're doing the same thing.
Very, very smart.
Yeah.
We don't give them enough credit, maybe.
No, they're very, very cunning.
I want to go on two things now. Like, it's so funny, like talking about the paleo and carnivore diet. Something we learned recently is actually Lauren Cordain, who invented the paleo diet, like the father, recommends that your LDL stays at 70 millimoles per deciliter or less. Like I think it was like 70 to 100 was his healthy range. And now somehow, I'm not exactly sure how it got there. Now we've got Saladino with 330 and saying it's fine.
Yeah.
When we're saying anything over 180 is a really something to be worried about.
Yeah.
But it started at 70 to 100. But now somehow people have taken it to this whole other level through, I'm not sure, like now it's not paleo, it's some other diet. It's nothing what it was meant to be.
Yeah, I mean, I've never even heard of the person who invented the paleo diet, but I like some of the philosophies. I like some of the principles of it. You know, they get rid of dairy and they eat things in their natural form.
It's
but
nothing from what we know it now.
When we were not eating meat every day of the week.
Bacon is
I see people getting their sausages and stuff like that. I'm like, mate, are you sure you're paleo?
It's so different to what. So I think it's just worth raising while we're on the topic of
totally
that.
agree.
So it's like 70 millimoles. That's low.
That's low.
That's like 20% meat. Really, you're having quite little, which I can probably get around a paleo diet for someone if they're eating. If you're at 70 millimoles, you're pretty like Esselstyn, or was it Ornish, who recommends 50 to 70 is good. So that's like whole foods plant-based, you get down to 50. So that's not a lot of variance between 70 and 50.
Yeah.
When we're at 300s and low 400s for some people.
Well, Saladino's, he started eating plants now, did you know?
I think I told you that last time.
Did you tell me that last time? Because I saw it on YouTube the other day. It came up in my YouTube feed, and I was like, goodness me, here he goes. And he was at Costa Rica or somewhere on a fruit festival, eating lots of fruit.
One of us, fruitarian. Imagine on that carnivore to fruitarian. What a change!
He feels better now. Too.
Oh, I'm glad he feels better. I don't wish him harm. I just wish he stopped spending so much misinformation. That's all. That's all I hope. Yeah. Did you end up watching Eating Our Way to Extinction?
Yes,
by the way. I did. What did you think of that?
I absolutely loved it. I think it's one of those things, right? There's just all these different avenues on presenting the data and presenting the facts, and you just need to hit it from every avenue. And the cinematography is the important part. It sort of gives people the emotions and the feels behind it, as you know, being a videographer. And that's what's important, getting people's emotions into it. And once they feel emotional and passionate about something, then they'll do something to change. So I think that film will really make a difference there.
It really struck a chord for us because we watched it a week after I was called a racist. So it's like, and now you're watching how animal agriculture takes away land. I'm not going to... I can spoil it. I reckon it's a great doco to watch, and I'm not going to spoil the actual emotion in it because I think it's got to be one of the best docos. Like it was conducted very, very well. Yeah. Very, very well. And they talk about Aboriginal people literally getting taken from the land, like these First Nation South Americans, right? Like literally, and they really they say it on the camera in Spanish, saying this is the doing of animal agriculture. Like and one of the I got chills when this guy's like, You know, when I was growing up and with my dad, you used to hear the forest speaking to you with the monkeys and stuff. He's like, no, you can't hear a thing.
You can hear the machines
You can hear the
chopping trees
machine, yeah.
down.
It was
it's
just
sad, mate.
It was very heartbreaking
Yeah.
to see that.
And
really.
I'm telling you right now, if they did a survey on me after I watched that film, I'd be feeling depressed and sad too. So my mood would be low, right?
Yeah. No, it was
Yeah.
it was quite hard to watch. Anyone who hasn't given it a watch, I'm not sure if it's actually released now. I probably will be by the time this episode's out. Actually, really do recommend. It's Eating Our Way to Extinction.
It's good.
Really, really good one. Highly recommend. We're going to touch on saturated fat for a moment before we finish up.
Yeah, we can touch on that. Yeah.
So, saturated fat, just to give you the platform to speak, is something we can get from animals and plants.
Yeah.
So it's not something we're specifically talking about from an animal standpoint. You can definitely find it in plant sources. There is data to show that it's slightly better in a plant source, but it's not super compelling. I think it's more compelling to trying to stay away from it, because especially high sources in my research is things like coconut oil,
Yeah.
whether it's extra virgin oil.
Peanut
matter.
oil, is that peanut butter as well, I think, is it?
I think
Is it
it's
saturated fat
it's
in
pretty
peanut
low
butter?
amount. Peanut
Yeah,
butter oil
so
is
it's-
more polyunsaturated, I believe.
Yeah, mostly, like most plants
Yeah.
are, but I believe there you still find some saturated fat in there. I don't know, I
Actually,
could be wrong.
that's a good idea. Do you want to run us through the different fats if you know them?
Oh, mate, I'm not a cardiologist. I know Moofers and poofers, that's about it. So
Movers and poofers.
Yeah. So get a cardiologist to do that one for you. But I think from a saturated fat perspective, I sort of, again, like this is a cardiologist territory and a nutritionist territory, and but it is, I take my information from scientific consensus, and if you look at a lot of the studies, then we can talk about the clever ways that the meat industry, so the strategies they employ to create doubt, which is what we talked about before, but just to talk about the evidence for where this comes from. So there's some really good studies. There's a study in the BMJ. It's a meta-analysis of about 390 odd metabolic ward studies. So metabolic ward studies are the gold standard in nutrition science. So they're the most accurate. When we're talking evidence hierarchy, they're right up there. And this is a meta-analysis of them. So we're talking pinnacle and a really, really good quality studies.
And metabolic ward is where they have you actually in a ward.
In a
they
ward,
control everything
yeah.
you eat. They can measure you whenever they want. So it's
Yeah.
very, very controlled.
It's
Just to add that in
essentially
there.
a randomized controlled trial of nutrition studies. So it's very a very accurate way, and essentially what they did was they showed a direct relationship between eating saturated fats and increasing your LDL cholesterol. Mm-hmm. And then going one step further, Robert Mensink, who did a study, it was published by the World Health Organization, that he did a regression analysis on that, and what he wanted to see was essentially was the rise in LDL cholesterol as a direct result of the saturated fats, or was it purely due to substituting saturated fats with moofers and poofers, or carbohydrates as well? Mm-hmm. And he could show a direct relationship between our observed and predicted cholesterols based on increasing saturated fatty acid intake. So it's essentially, these Mensink equations are, these are from very smart people, very well-respected people who showed a direct linear relationship. It's probably it's incredibly positive correlative data saying that. And then you go on to, this is where consensus becomes important. This is where scientific consensus is incredibly important, because you look at the European Society of Cardiology and the American College of Cardiology, the American Heart Association, their guidelines all stipulate, they show very, very they show very clearly that increasing your LDL cholesterol is associated with atherosclerosis, and to reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease, you need to reduce your saturated fatty acid intake. And that is from people who know it better than anyone. They know it better than me. They know it better than... They see arteries all the time. And I just think, there's some really good quality data out there now, and to ignore the consensus is insane. You're essentially ignoring the consensus that the Earth's round. You're ignoring the consensus that climate change is real. And if you're ignoring the consensus that saturated fat has no impact on atherosclerosis, then you're just in denial. And so what the industry do to manufacture doubt, they manufacture ignorance, is they can create a number of ways where they do that. So a lot of their studies are cross-sectional studies, so they're meta-analyses of cross-sectional data. So when we talk about, we said, just for the listeners, cross-sectional studies are that snapshot in time. It's a snapshot in that particular moment in time where we ask a question and we say how much saturated fat are you consuming, and we can look at what your LDL cholesterol is and see if it has an effect. And the trouble is that there's such a huge genetic variability between people. So someone can eat a very high amount of saturated fats and have a very low cholesterol. Someone can eat a very low amount of saturated fat and have a high cholesterol. So we say, oh, there's no correlation. And that's where the meat industry love this. And they say, oh, there's absolutely no correlation, you see. And then a lot of the other times they're looking at people who are young, fit and healthy, so who haven't really had the chance for that disease to progress.
Yeah, we're looking at like under 40s.
Yeah, so you're not going to see that. I don't see, mate. I can see the most unhealthy people in the world under the age of 40, and their heart and their arteries are fine. I'm sure of it. So they haven't had that opportunity to have that disease progression. And then a lot of the other times they do a very clever. This is where we talk about pseudoscience, where they manufacture the study to suit the conclusion they want. They control for cholesterol, so it's a stepping stone, right? You have saturated fat increases your cholesterol, which increases your risk of atherosclerosis. So, they'll call it control for cholesterol. So anyone who has high cholesterol, they'll just you're only going to compare people with low cholesterol, and you're not going to see that difference, unfortunately. And so it's an over adjustment, and it's a flawed study.
I'm almost bursting out in laughter because I read, I think, which paper you're talking about, and it was like maybe 2,000 people, and I saw in there that they controlled for cholesterol. They'd written there as part of their methodology, and I just said, what?
They've manufactured some really
I'm just not
clever
understanding
studies.
what the point of the study was.
Yeah, well, it's just to create doubt. That is the point of the study, is to create. So doubt is their hottest commodity. It's the number one thing that they want to manufacture, and industry thrive on doubt because people will just shut down after that.
Yeah, I think it's really important, if anyone gets anything from listening to the show or our conversation, it's just look into things, and that means as well, don't take our word for it. Like, I'm sure on this show I've gotten many things wrong. That's why I try to do more research before I say something, and I generally won't say a stat unless I've memorized it or tattooed it on myself. And I think it really comes down to where you're getting your information from. So I would also really recommend who you recommend. So Garth Davis, Dr. Matthew Nagra, Nicholas Carter. These are the accounts, Andrew Little. These are the accounts you need to follow so you can get the most unbiased information. Following accounts who cite what they say, because God knows when I message Sustainable Dish, and I can show the messages, I can post it up. I asked her for a source 4 times.
Yeah.
And the only response I got was buy my book.
Yeah, that's exactly what she said to me. Read my book. So I did. And it was terrible.
And it's really important to be careful who you listen to, because it takes me back. I had a conversation, but I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. There's a big YouTuber called Mike the Vegan.
Oh, yeah. I've seen him. I've seen Avi and Mike the Vegan want to have debates and things.
Yeah,
I love Avi.
He's incredibly intelligent, this guy. And we kind of talked about this during our interview together, and I'd watched this video with Shana from this big YouTube account called What I've Learned. 5 million subscribers or whatever, and he did a thing saying eating beef will not destroy this world, or the topic was something like that. And he had one source only for this 15-minute video, and it was an interview with a beef scientist, so a scientist sponsored by the International Board of Beef. And that was his only source.
This is going to be incredibly accurate source, I can imagine.
Incredibly accurate. Yeah. And I watched it. Look, I'm all... If someone's questioning my beliefs, fine. Whatever. I'm happy to. Yeah. I'm confident in doing that as well. And the consensus was that almonds take more water than beef. And I talked about this on the show before, but anyone who doesn't... And I think it actually flows along with the theme, because it is this. It's like your next level. So someone's going to come to you and say, "Well, you eat almonds and you're not perfect," and it's like us saying, "There's no silver bullet." And my very, very clear refute and rebuttal to that is really easy, and one you can memorize. Nobody, not a single soul, is saying, "I'm not going to have a burger. Instead, I will have an almond." So you're not comparing it to the right thing. Compare dairy to soy. I can show you some pretty good trends there. Compare beef to a lentil burger. I can show you some pretty good trends. If you want to compare, it's like apple to an apple. You can't compare the nutrition of a banana to the nutrition of a bean.
Yeah.
You're eating them hopefully at different, I don't know, unless there's a meal together at
Yeah.
different times. They give you different things. And I think it's important to, and I think we might have touched on this in our round one, it's like compared to what, but also be careful who you listen to. Because I actually had no idea he was a beef scientist until Mike had told me. But I knew he was spitting complete garbage because nothing he had said actually had a source. And that's whatever. I can pick up on those things, but it just sucks that the average person isn't going to know, and they're going to think this guy's a scientist. You know, wow, he went to school. He went to
Technobabble.
Technobabble. That's the word of the day. I just find it really fascinating, but I think my overarching point is just be extremely careful with who you follow.
Yeah, and that's the thing. This is where the world of misinformation becomes, and social media is probably one of the biggest crimes against humanity, because it gives anyone can become a professional, right? Anyone has the chance to become an expert on social media, and that's the really crazy part. I just see people where we value followers over credentials, and as I always say, you know, credentials aren't everything, but don't employ a plumber to do the electrical wiring in your house. You know, you need people, and this is why consensus again is important, because it's people from relevant backgrounds who you know, will analyze that data. And you need when you find those flaws in people's arguments, that's the important part, and it takes a lot of energy to do that. It takes a lot of effort to find the flaws in their arguments because they sound very convincing. But when you start to find the flaws, you can really start to question their credibility, and their arguments start to fall apart.
And they fall apart so quickly.
Yeah.
And 100%. You kind of know when they're just like, but
that's why I got blocked by Diana Rogers. You know, she just.
You've said her name too many times. She's gonna like appear like one of those things where you say like boogeyman in front of the mirror 3 times. You know, but we're giving her too much airtime. She doesn't deserve it.
Yeah, true.
No, but also I will clarify saying I don't think she's a bad person at all. I don't know what she comes to gain from having that. I'm not sure if she values the taste more than coming into reality, because she is a hope for a lot of people. A lot of people really holding on to her and her ideologies. And again, I will go on the record saying I don't hate her as a person. I don't know her personally. I think overarchingly humans are here to do a good job. I'm not sure why, again, she's like that.
Yeah, but you're holding her accountable, which is exactly what we should be doing in science. You don't. I don't hate everyone I talk to, and I know you don't either. But I'm going to hold someone accountable, and if people are spreading misinformation, then I'll certainly call them out on it. Yeah, I would expect someone to do the same for me. If I said something wrong on this podcast, you let me know.
I will. I'll message you.
Thanks, mate.
Look, we're coming to the end of this. This was really fun doing a Q&A as well. Awesome. Thank you for everyone who submitted their questions. Let's all follow Dr. Andrew Little on Instagram. I'll leave every way to connect with you in the show notes.
Easy. There's only one way. Just come on to the social media.
Gram.
It's the worst place ever, but it's kind of essential. It's a necessary
It's what you make of it. It is a tool.
It's true.
It is just a tool.
It can be a really nice tool.
It can be. Do you have any final words of wisdom? Last time your words of wisdom was the 5 pillars of health, I believe, which is 6 now.
6 now. It would be 6, I would say. Yeah.
Do you have anything you'd like to leave us with to end the show?
I think probably one of the biggest things is just being aware of the patterns that are developing in society at the moment with seeing the way that the industry want us to not know. And it's just happening over and over again. We've seen it with the tobacco industry, we've seen it with the fossil fuel industry, and we're now seeing it with the meat and dairy industry. And it is really hard to sift through the data and to work out who to trust. On one end of the spectrum, we've got medical doctors advocating for a 100% plant-based diet. And on the other end of the spectrum, we've got doctors are advocating for a 100% meat-based diet, both arguing that they're going to save the planet and save your health. How do you know who to believe? Like, they're educated people. Unfortunately, educated people are not immune to their own bias, and they're not immune to the influence of industry. And that's the sad part. And so, but when you start to see the patterns unfold, and these patterns are just recurring, this is nothing new. What the meat and dairy industry are doing, it's nothing new. It's been done many, many times before. It starts to make a little bit more sense, and there's a little bit of clarity. And probably one of the most if you're interested, if your listeners are interested, there's a brilliant doctor by the name of Stephen Novella who does a lecture series on Audible. It's called the Great Lectures or something, but it's your critical mind, a guide to your deceptive mind, a guide to critical thinking. And the most important part of it is understanding the flaws of your brain, the limitations of your brain, and why we're all subject to our own biases. And once you understand the flaws of your own brain, you'll start to pick them up in other people, and you'll also start to question yourself as well. And I think that's the most important thing in life.
Yeah, for sure. Accepting our own flaws, because we do all have flaws. I got flaws, 100%. You got flaws, everyone's got flaws.
100%. And we're not all experts in everything. I would love to be an expert in everything. I'd love to be an expert on saturated fats. I'd love to be an expert on the climate, and I'm not. I've got a very, very small piece of medicine that I specialize in, and I really enjoy it. But I also, I try to branch out as much as I can. I try and really apply the background and the context I have to that data. But you've just got to be careful of who you believe.
Yeah, I love that. That's finishing up on a really good words of wisdom, actually. Look, thank you everyone for listening the whole way through. Look, Andrew, I've got to say, since our first conversation, and since meeting you like 3 or 4 years ago via Instagram, it was a while ago through Be Humane.
Yeah.
It's awesome to see how much you're really making an impact on people, and it might have been something I mentioned last time, but it's funny when you look at, and not that I judge you by your social media at all, I can judge you as a human since I know you in real life, but it's awesome to see how your account has changed. And a lot of people grow their accounts through different means, and I think with you it's so genuine and important that people really feel that somehow just through this little electronic device that you bring information in a way that you don't have to. And it's really awesome to see how, yes, selfishly you are doing this for your kids so you can have your grandkids, but at the same time that's the most altruistic thing. And I think the lessons, the way you're educating yourself, the best part about you educating yourself is that you're actually sharing it to other people. Because there's no point in you being the most intelligent human if you can't go and share that. There's no point in you having all this knowledge about nutrition and climate change if you could just keep it to yourself, and you're not helping the planet by just keeping it to yourself. You're sharing this with the world. So I really appreciate that. I definitely use you as a resource, and I do enjoy seeing all your stuff, and I do enjoy knowing you as a human being, being as intelligent as you are. So I have said, and I will say it again, make sure everyone follows Andrew. If you have any further questions, I'm sure you can message either myself or Andrew, and they'll be more than happy to answer them. We're all here trying to make the planet a better place than when we found it.
Certainly, mate, and I want to thank you too for your kind words. I'm blushing, but also
it's just a heat in here.
But yeah, it is hot in here. But also too, I can certainly see that you've done your research, and there are a lot of things that you are very well educated on that I wouldn't even be able to scratch the surface on. And like I've said it to you before, but one of my good friends listened to our podcast and had very, very good things to say about you. So it's always a pleasure. I wouldn't have invited you back to my house if I didn't enjoy the first time. So it was good to come back and catch up.
My house this time. Yeah.
But it was awesome, and I thank you very much. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you once again.
Hi there. Welcome to the end of the episode. Thank you for listening the whole way through. It was an incredibly insightful conversation, and I hope, much like myself, you took something out of it. I can imagine that this episode will land true for a lot of you and raise some sort of benefit in your life. That being said, I know there's definitely room for round 3. I do love the conversations with Andrew, so he'll definitely be around for another episode. And if you did enjoy and you want to connect with Andrew, I've left all the links to connect with him in the show notes below, Instagram being the best one. If you have any questions or you'd like to join the conversation around this, head over to Instagram at plant.paradigm, where we continue the conversation. With that being said, like in the beginning, remember to rate the show or share this to a friend, family member, or colleague. Anything you do helps the show abundantly. So with that being said, I will see you on next week's episode. Stay happy, eat plants, peace.